Hi, my name is Kevin Fernandez and welcome to my channel, Gamers Genie. Today we're going to learn the adventurous fellowship game, The Lord of the Rings, the card game. Inspired by the writings of J.R.R. Tolkien, this 1 to 4 player game designed by Nate French and published by Fantasy Flight Games. Darkness has once again spread across the land of Middle-earth. And it is up to you and your fellowship to try to destroy the dark powers that be. Will you be successful and keep the evil powers of Sauron at bay? Or will you be driven mad by the sheer mention of darkness? Let's find out as we go to the table and learn to play The Lord of the Rings. For the first game, each player chooses one of the 4 spheres of influence and uses their starter deck for that sphere. The card numbers of each of the 4 spheres are listed. Each sphere is also listed with 3 heroes that should be used with the starter deck. Leadership with the heroes Aragorn, Gloin, and Theodred. Tactics, heroes Legolas, Thalin, and Gimli. Spirit, heroes Eleanor, Dunhir, and Eowyn. And lore, heroes Glorfindel, Barivor, and Denethor. Each starter deck should also include 1 copy of a neutral ally, Gandalf. Next, the players should select a scenario they would like to play. For the first game, players should try the Passage Through Mirkwood scenario, which was designed as an introductory scenario. Separate the cards for this scenario. This consists of the quest cards, numbered 120 to 123, and the encounter cards marked with the Passage Through Mirkwood Dol Guldur Orcs symbols, like this one. Before playing The Lord of the Rings, the card game, follow these quick steps in order. Shuffle decks as with a deck of playing cards. Shuffle all player decks and encounter decks separately until they are randomized. Do not shuffle the quest cards into the encounter deck, and do not shuffle the hero cards into the player decks. Place heroes and set initial threat levels for each player. Places their heroes in front of them, adds up their threat cost of the heroes they control, and sets their threat tracker to the same value. This value is the player's starting threat for the game. So our starting threat with all 3 of these heroes is 29. Set up token bank. Place the damage tokens, progress tokens, and resource tokens in a pile next to the encounter deck. All players take tokens from this bank as needed throughout the game. We have this nice little token divider that my dad made out of feels like cardboard. So wound tokens, resource tokens, progress tokens. And we can grab these, and we'll set these off camera and grab them when needed. The players determine the first player based on a majority group decision. If this proves impossible, determine the first player at random. Once determined, the first player takes the first player token and places it in front of them as a reference. Set quest cards, arranging the quest cards in sequential order based off of the numbers on the back of them. Stage 1A should be on top, with the numbers increasing when moving down the stack. Place the quest deck near the encounter deck in the center of the play area. Follow scenario setup instructions on the back of the first quest card. Sometimes provide setup instructions for a scenario. Follow these instructions before flipping the quest card. Players then begin the game, starting with the first game round. So, for example, Flies and Spiders needs the Forest Spider and the Old Forest Road out to start the game. And that completes the setup. The staging area is a unique element of the game's playing field. It represents the potential dangers that the players might face as they progress on their quest. During the quest phase, enemy and location cards are revealed from the encounter deck and placed in the staging area. Cards in the staging area are imminent threats to the players, including enemies that need to be defeated and locations that need to be explored. While a location is in the staging area, the players are not considered at that location. Instead, it represents a distant threat. Players have the option of traveling to a location during the travel phase. Similarly, enemies in the staging area are not yet engaged with any of the players. Enemies engage players when a player's threat level is high enough to draw out that enemy. Players also have the option to voluntarily engage enemies during the encounter phase. So he's 25, I'm 29, I would engage this spider whether I want to or not. Each player has their own discard pile and encounter deck. Also has its own discard pile. Whatever card is discarded, it goes to the discard pile belonging to the card's originating deck. The Lord of the Rings is played over a series of rounds. Each round is divided into 7 phases. Some phases are played simultaneously by all players, while other phases the players are asked separately, with the first player acting first, obviously, and play proceeding clockwise around the table. The 7 phases are in order. Number 1, the resource phase. Number 2, the planning phase. Number 3, the quest phase. Number 4, the travel phase. 5, encounter. 6, combat. And 7, refresh. Once all 7 phases are complete, the round is over and play proceeds to the resource phase of the next round. A turn sequence diagram of all these phases and the game events that occur during each phase can be found on pages 30 to 31 of your rule book. Each player simultaneously adds 1 resource token from each of their heroes' resource pools. A resource pool is a collection of resource tokens stored near a hero card. These tokens belong to that hero's pool and can be used to pay for cards that belong to the hero's sphere of influence. Each hero has 1 resource pool. For simplicity's sake, we're just going to keep them on the cards. After collecting resources from each player, draws 1 card from their deck and adds it to their hand. When a player is instructed to draw 1 or more cards, they always draw those cards from the top of their deck. If a player has no cards remaining in their deck, they do not draw. The planning phase is the only phase in which a player can play out ally and attachment cards from their hand. The first player plays any and all ally and attachment cards they wish to play first. The opportunity to play cards then proceeds clockwise around the table. In order for a player to play a card from their hand or activate a certain card effect, they must pay it by spending resource tokens from the resource pool of a hero who has the resource icon that matches the card's sphere of influence. This is called a resource match. Resources that are spent to pay for cards or card effects are taken from their hero's resource pool and placed in the general token bank. If a hero is exhausted, resources may still be spent from that resource pool. Cards with the cost of 0 do not require a resource to be spent in order to pay their cost, but they do require at least 1 hero under that player's control to have a resource icon that matches the card sphere. After a player plays an ally or attachment card from their hand, place it face up and ready in the play area. Attachment cards should be placed partially overlapping either above or below the card to which they are attached. If a player has multiple heroes with similar resource icons, they may use resources from multiple pools of the same sphere to pay for a single card. However, if you are a beginner, we do recommend that you do not mix and match spheres until you are a more experienced player. Neutral cards which belong to no sphere of influence require no resource match to play. This means that they can be paid for with resources from any hero's pool. Also, when paying for a neutral card, a player may combine resources from heroes with different resource icons. Gandalf is the only neutral card in the core set. Some cards have abilities that can be triggered from play, but still require the triggering player to pay resources. Triggering a card ability from a card already and in play requires no resource match unless otherwise specified by the ability. Characters and attachment cards enter the game in the ready position, that is, face up on the playing surface in front of their controller, like what we have right here. When a card has been used for some purpose, such as commit to the quest, to attack, to defend, or to use a character ability that requires a card to exhaust, it is turned at 90 degrees sideways and considered exhausted. An exhausted character cannot exhaust again and therefore cannot partake in any action that requires exhaustion until it has been readied once more. When a player is instructed by the game or by a card effect to ready a card, they move that card to its normal upright position. In the quest phase, the players attempt to make progress on the current stage of their quest. This phase is broken into 3 steps. Number 1, commit characters. Number 2, staging, which considers this area right here. Number 3, quest resolution. Players have the opportunity to take action and play event cards at the end of each step. Each player may commit a character to the current quest card. Characters are exhausted when they commit to a quest, and we know what that looks like. Players commit characters to a quest as a team, starting with the first player, then proceeding clockwise around the table. Each player may commit as many of their characters to the quest as they would like. After each player has had the opportunity to commit characters to the quest, the encounter deck reveals 1 card per player. This is known in the game as staging. These encounter cards are revealed one at a time, with any when revealed effects being resolved before the next card is revealed. Enemy and location cards revealed in this manner are placed in the staging area. Treachery cards are resolved, and unless otherwise indicated by the card text, placed in the discard pile if the encounter deck is ever empty during the quest phase. The encounter discard pile is shuffled and reset back into the encounter deck. Finally, the players compare the combined willpower strength of all committed characters against the combined strength of all cards in the staging area. If the will is higher, the players have successfully quested and they make progress on the quest. A number of progress tokens to the amount by which they will overcome the threat are placed on the current quest card. Note that if there is an active location, progress tokens are placed on that location until it is explored. The remainder are then placed on the current quest. So, for example, the combined threat right now, and that is these little symbols right here. So it is 5 of these cards. So if I committed all of my cards, plus if I committed my ally card, if I was playing by myself, obviously I will be playing with Jordan later on. So I commit Faramir, Gloin, and Theodred and Aragorn in order to do that. However, when Aragorn is committed to the quest, I can remove a resource and ready him. So he can be used to fight. So that would be the only way I can do that. But obviously, I will have more allies to help me with the quest later on. If the threat is higher, the players have unsuccessfully quested and they are driven back by the encounter deck. Each player must raise their threat dial by the amount by which the threat was higher than the combined will of all committed characters. If the combined committed will score is equal to the combined threat score in the staging area, no progress tokens are placed in the player, and the players do not increase their threat tiles. Characters committed to the quest are considered committed to the quest through to the end of the quest phase, unless removed from the quest by a card effect. They do not remain exhausted once this is complete. During the travel phase, the players may travel as a group to any one location in the staging area by moving it from the staging area and placing it alongside the current quest card, causing it to become the active location. The players can only travel to one location at a time. The first player makes the final decision. While in the staging area, location cards added to the encounter deck threat once the players have traveled to a location. That location no longer contributes threat, as the players are considered to have traveled to the location and are confronting its threat. Instead, an active location acts as a buffer for the currently revealed quest card. Any progress tokens that would be placed on a quest card are instead placed on the active location. If a location ever has as many progress tokens as it has quest points, that location is considered explored and is discarded from play. Players cannot travel to a new location if another location card is active. The players must explore the active location before traveling elsewhere. Some locations have a travel effect, which is an additional cost that must be paid when the players travel there. Like this one. After you travel to the Old Forest Road, the players may choose and ready a character they control. That's not that bad. The encounter phase consists of 2 steps: player engagement and engagement checks. First, each player has an option to engage one enemy in the staging area. This is done by moving the enemy from the staging area and placing it in front of the engaging player. Each player has one chance to optionally engage one enemy during this step, and an enemy's engagement cost has no bearing on this procedure. Second, the players must make a series of engagement checks to see if any of the enemies remaining in the staging area engage them. The first player compares their threat level against the engagement cost of each of the enemy cards in the staging area. The enemy with the highest engagement cost that is equal to or lower than the player's threat level engages this player and moves from the staging area to the space in front of them. This is called making an engagement check. After the first player makes an engagement check, the player to their left makes their own engagement check. This player compares their threat level against engagement cost of each of the remaining enemy cards in the staging area and engages the enemy with the highest engagement cost that is equal to or lower than their own threat level. This process continues through all the players proceeding clockwise around the table. Once all players have made an engagement check, the first player makes a second engagement check. Players continue making engagement checks in this manner until there are no enemies remaining in the staging area that can engage any of the players. Whether an enemy is engaging through an engagement check, through a card effect or through a player's choice, the end result is the same, with the enemy and the player engaging one another in all cases. The player is considered to have engaged the enemy, and the enemy is considered to engage the player. Note that during this phase, enemies do not attack players. They merely engage players. Enemies attack the players with whom they are engaged during the combat phase. In the combat phase, enemies attack first. All enemies that are engaged with players attack each round, and the players resolve those attacks one at a time. At the beginning of the combat phase, the players deal one shadow card to each enemy. Engaged enemy, sorry. Deal the top card of the encounter deck face down to each engaged enemy. When dealing cards to a single player's enemy, always deal to the enemy with the highest engagement cost first. These are both the same cards, so it doesn't really count. Cards should first be dealt to the enemies attacking the first player, and then proceed around the board until all enemies have one card. If the encounter deck runs out of cards, and any enemies that have not been dealt shadow cards are not dealt shadow cards this round. Any empty encounter deck only resets during the quest phase. When resolving enemy attacks, the players follow these 4 steps in order. Players may play event cards and take actions at the end of each step. Step 1. Choose an enemy. The first player chooses which attack among the enemies to which he is engaged to resolve first. Step 2. Declare defender. A character must exhaust to be declared as a defender. Only one character can be declared as a defender against each attacking enemy. A player who also has the option to let an attack go undefeated and declare no defenders for the attack unless a card effect specifies otherwise. Players can only declare defenders against enemies with whom they are engaged. Step 3. Resolve shadow effect. The player flips the enemy shadow card face up and resolves any shadow effect that card might have. Step 4. Determine combat damage. This is done by subtracting the defense strength of the defending character from the attack strength of the attacking character. The remaining value is the amount of damage that must immediately be dealt to the defending character, possibly destroying that character. If a character is destroyed by an attack, additional damage does not assign to other characters. If the defense is equal to or higher than the attack, no damage is dealt. If an attack is undefended, all damage from the attack must be assigned to a single hero controlled by the active player. Allies cannot take damage from the undefeated attacks. If the defending character leaves play or is removed from combat before damage is assigned, the attack is considered undefended. A character's defense does not absorb damage from undefended attacks or from card effects. Once all players have resolved enemies' attacks, each player, starting with the first player proceeding clockwise, has the opportunity to strike back and declare attacks against the enemy. In order to declare an attack, a player must exhaust at least one of his heroes' character. Character must exhaust to be declared as an attacker. When declaring an attack, a player must also declare which enemy is the target of the attack. A player may declare multiple characters as attackers, for example, these two, against a single enemy, pulling their attack strength into a single value. A player has the opportunity to declare one attack against each enemy with which they are engaged. To resolve an attack against an enemy, a player follows these 3 steps in order. Players may play event cards and take action at the end of each step. Number 1, declare a target of attack and declare attackers. A player does this by choosing one enemy with whom they are currently engaged and exhausting any number of characters as attackers, like what we did with Theodred and Faramir. Number 2, determine attack strength. Add up the total attack strength of the attacking characters that have been declared against the target. So, Theodred has 2 and Faramir has 1. So that together is 3. Determine combat damage. This is step 3. This is done by subtracting the target enemy's defense strength from the combined attack of all attacking characters. The remaining value is the amount of damage that is immediately dealt to the target. If the defense is equal or higher than the attack, no damage is dealt. After a character's attack is resolved, so for example, we would have won that, so it would have taken, since this is 3 minus 1, it takes 2 damage. The spider takes 2 damage. After a player's first attack has been resolved, they can declare another attack against any eligible enemy target they have not yet attacked this round. Each player can declare an attack with any number of eligible attackers they control against each enemy with which they are engaged once each round. Once all the players' attacks resolve, they proceed clockwise to from the first player until all players have resolved their attacks. Shadow cards remain on the enemy with which they were dealt throughout the combat phase. If that enemy leaves play, discard the shadow card from play at the end of the combat phase. Discard all shadow cards that were dealt this round. For each point of damage dealt to a character, enemy, 1 damage token is placed on that character. Enemy card. Each damage token on a hero, ally, or enemy card reduces that card's hit points by 1. Damage tokens remain on the card until another effect heals or moves the damage off the card until the card leaves play. At time one of these cards has 0 hit points, it is immediately defeated. Defeated characters are placed in their owner's discard pile, and defeated enemies are placed in the encounter discard pile. This is the enemy, this is the ally. I just don't want to get people confused. Any enemy cards that are not defeated remain engaged with the player until they are defeated or removed by a card effect, or until that player is eliminated from the game. During the refresh phase, all exhausted cards are ready. Each player increases their threat by 1. There we go. And the first player passes the first player token to the next player clockwise to their left. That player becomes the new first player, then play proceeds to the resource phase of the next round. The game ends in one of 2 ways, with the players either winning or losing as a team. The players are considered to have lost if all players are eliminated before the completion of the final stage of the scenario deck. The players are considered to have won if at least one player survives through the completion of the final stage of the scenario. A player is eliminated from the game if all of their heroes are killed. So, like so. If their threat level reaches 50, or if a card effect forces their elimination. When a player is eliminated, their hand, all the cards they control, and their deck are placed in their owner's discard pile. Any encounter cards with which that player was engaged are returned to the staging area, retaining any wound tokens that have been placed on them. The remaining players continue to play the game. Note that after a player is eliminated, one less card is revealed from the encounter deck during the staging step of the quest phase, as there is now one less player involved in the game. Players immediately advance to the next stage of the quest as soon as they place a number of progress tokens equal to or greater than the number of quest points on the card. Additional progress tokens earned against the quest do not carry over to the next stage. All progress tokens on the quest are returned to the token bank. When players advance the next stage, players follow any instructions on the newly revealed quest card as it is revealed. So for this one, A Fork in the Road, it just tells a story. There's no setup. So that would be the new quest. The game state of other cards does not change. Cards in the staging area remain in the staging area. Cards engaged with players remain engaged. Exhausted characters remain exhausted. Damage tokens and resource remain as they are placed, and the round sequence is not interrupted. If the players win the game, use this process to determine their group score for the game. A group score is determined by adding together for undesirable elements, the final threat level of each player, the threat penalty on all dead heroes, the number of damage tokens on all surviving heroes, and the number of rounds taken to defeat the scenario multiplied by 10, and then subtracting any victory points that have been collected. Players collect victory points by defeating enemies and exploring locations that grant victory points. Players tally each round for their score at the end of the refresh phase. When a player is eliminated, their threat is considered to be 50, and all their heroes are considered dead. Note that any eliminated players does not, however, increase beyond their threat elimination level, 50, unless otherwise specified by the quest rules or by a card effect. With this scoring system, a victory with the low score is more desirable than a victory with a high score. Scoring is a useful tool in evaluating the performance of the deck or party over time, or in comparing one deck or group of decks from decks to another. This enables players to play the same scenario multiple times with different hero and deck combinations, evaluating their effectiveness in each game. Score sheet provided on the back cover of the rule book. However, I would like to add this before we come to this final close. If you do not wish to score the game, you don't have to. This is a team game after all, but if you do desire to score, then by all means just follow what I previously mentioned. And that's all you need to know to play Lord of the Rings, the card game. If you have any questions about this game, please put them in the comments below and I'll get to them to my earliest convenience. If you're new to this channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so that way you can get notified whenever I upload a new video. I upload a new gameplay and how to play video every Monday, as well as when I have it, new unboxing videos every Wednesday when I remember. That's really hard for me to remember. So thank you. Be on the lookout for our upcoming gameplay video on this game. But until then, thanks for the view.